If you're a fanatic of the unknown, unfamiliar, and enjoy creepy tales in story format, then welcome to Gravesend. We upload 1 to 2 times weekly, so hit that like and subscribe button, and don't forget to ring that bell for all notifications. Now on with our story. When Olivia woke up, she was a little confused. She didn't remember driving out to the beach house. She had been under so much stress lately, it seemed she was forgetting a lot of the little details. Maybe it was old age, maybe it was stress, but just maybe it was for the best. Sometimes some memories are better being left forgotten. Olivia was getting up in years, and up until now, she had led a wonderfully happy life. Picture-perfect family, wonderful husband, grandchildren, and yes, even great-grandchildren. She lay in bed reminiscing about so many wonderful memories. This was more than a vacation home. It was a home away from home, a place where they left the world behind. The houses where they celebrated their lives together. This big, beautiful box of love held so many memories, some ending in tears, some ending in laughter, but all ending in love. This was Olivia's most favorite place in the world. This is where she was always the happiest, and even under the circumstances, this is the place where she's the happiest. This is where their love began, and at the end of their journey, this is where their flame continues to burn, where their love continues to live. God may have taken away the love of her life, but one thing He graciously allowed her to keep, at least for now, was a lifetime of wonderful memories. Liam was the love of her life. They had been married for 53 wonderful years, and she wouldn't trade 1 second of 1 minute for anything in the world. Olivia was lost in her thoughts, but quickly snapped back to reality when she heard a loud noise in the kitchen. It sounded like pots and pans. A little frightened, she slowly got out of bed. Being careful not to make any noise, she grabbed her robe. She looked around the room for something to defend herself with. No one should be in the house. She started down the stairs and thought she heard Liam's voice. She stopped dead in her tracks, wondering, was she hearing things? But then she heard his voice again, calling her name. Liam is gone, she thought. How can he be in the kitchen? Strangely enough, when Olivia heard Liam's voice, she was no longer afraid. His voice calmed her, and even though she knew it really wasn't him, it was his spirit. Somehow, she didn't care what form he was in, as long as it was Liam. She went into the kitchen, and he was sitting at the table having breakfast. There was another place setting at the table, but oddly enough, she wasn't hungry this morning. Her appetite, as of late, was not what it used to be. She was also intrigued. She didn't know ghosts could not only prepare food, but actually eat and drink. She sat quietly in the kitchen with Liam. This brought her back so many wonderful memories that she still managed to hold on to. And even if her mind one day fails her altogether, the precious moments together will never be taken away. They will always live in her heart. Now, seeing Liam this way in death brought a little peace to Olivia. She was older and not in the best of health, so maybe the Lord let Liam come back to her so she wouldn't be afraid when the time came. Maybe if she's lucky, Liam will stay with her until the end. She missed Liam so much she didn't want to take her eyes off him, not even for 1 second. She was afraid he would disappear and never come back. Olivia didn't even try to talk to Liam or interact with him in any way. I really believe she worried this would scare him off. Somehow, he would realize he was dead and remember he shouldn't be there. Liam went out and sat down on the patio reading the paper. Olivia went out and sat down in the swing beside him. He looked over where she was sitting and smiled, then said, "Honey, I love you more than you could ever possibly have known." Olivia told Liam she loved him more than he ever knew. He smiled and laid his hand in her palm and continued gently swinging. After a few seconds, Liam said, "You know, it's not going to be easy now. It's going to be hard going on without you." Olivia, with tears in her eyes, shook her head. She couldn't believe Liam was able to interact with her in this way, but this made Olivia extremely happy. Olivia woke up in her bed in the middle of the day, and again, she didn't remember how she got there. She knew she was having more episodes now, and her memory was beginning to get worse day by day. She hadn't been to the doctor. She didn't care what the prognosis was, dementia or Alzheimer's, as long as she was able to spend her remaining days in peace with Liam. She wouldn't be able to take it locked up in some facility or having to stay with one of her children so they could take care of her. Besides, this wasn't a burden she wanted to put on anyone else, especially not her children. She went back downstairs looking for Liam. He was in the den watching the news. She sat down beside him, but he didn't acknowledge her this time. She reached over and placed her hand on his, but he didn't react. Olivia didn't know how all of this worked, but what she did know is that sometimes it did work, like out in the swing. It would probably take some time to learn the spirit stuff, but she didn't care. She had time. It was getting late, so Liam went up for bed, and of course Olivia followed him up and climbed in right beside him. He laid his arm on top of her and said, "I love you, honey." Olivia told him she loved him too. Olivia woke up the next morning, and luckily this time she remembered coming up and getting in bed with Liam the night before. She went downstairs to find Liam, but she couldn't find him anywhere. Olivia was quite upset and thought maybe he had left and she would never see him again. She didn't understand why he wasn't there with her, why he would just leave without letting her know in some way that he was leaving. Olivia spent the morning on the patio, gently swinging like she and Liam had the morning before. She looked out across the ocean and floated back into memories of her kids playing out in the sand when they were little. It's funny how you remember such little things. Something so insignificant, there's absolutely no reason why you would hold on to that memory, but you do. Ironically, Olivia thought, there are other memories that were so life-changing that somehow seem to be forgotten. She heard a noise in the formal living room and ran to see what it was. When she turned the corner, she saw Liam sitting on the couch with a sad look on his face. He seemed devastated. Olivia wondered what was wrong, and she asked Liam what was wrong, but he didn't answer. The next morning, Olivia woke up in bed, but again didn't remember going to bed or remember much of what she did the day before. She heard Liam singing like he always did in the shower, so this brought a smile to her face and lessened the worry about forgetting. Same typical routine each day. Breakfast, time on the patio in the swing, waking up in bed the next morning. Olivia knew her memory was getting worse and worse. She was afraid it would get to the point where she didn't remember anything, even Liam. This is what she feared the most, not remembering Liam. This was her greatest fear. She was glad he wasn't there to have to watch her go through this. Olivia thought about reaching out to her daughter for help, but each day Olivia would say, just one more day. She kept phone numbers, names, and relationships by the phone, just in case she woke up one morning and had no memory of anyone or anything in her life. Olivia was frightened about how the end may come, but she wasn't afraid of dying anymore. She knew she would finally be with Liam forever. The next morning she woke up, and this morning was a little different. Instead of sitting out in the swing on the patio, Liam continued walking. Olivia followed closely behind. She wondered where he was taking her, and she was a little afraid to wander off from the house too far. What if she couldn't remember how to get back? The next morning she woke up in bed and remembered the walk from the day before and being frightened about going too far from the house, but she couldn't remember anything else about the walk or where they went. She went downstairs, and this morning there was breakfast, swinging on the patio, and then a walk. Somewhere during the walk, Olivia blacked out. She wasn't in the bed, but she had lost some time somewhere and didn't remember what happened. She was in the middle of a field, so she continued walking straight ahead. She was a little scared, but she knew that she had to continue forward. There was no way Liam would lead her out here and just leave her. She was confident he would make sure she found her way home. She found herself standing in an all too familiar place and wondered why she was here. She looked up and saw Liam in the distance. As she slowly approached, she could hear him crying, and he was holding flowers in his hand. He squatted down, then a darkness fell across the sky. Tears from the heavens above began to fall, and rolls of thunder shook the earth. So many emotions were coming all at once, and this was just too much for Olivia to handle. Then, suddenly, there was a calm. Olivia now understood everything. She wasn't losing her mind. It was her mind losing her. In a way, Olivia wanted to run, but she knew she couldn't. It was time to face her destiny, her reality of being alone, at least for now. The gravestone read, "In loving memory of my beloved wife, Olivia Whitten Cannon, May 1949 to March 2022. It wasn't Liam who had died, it was Olivia. Olivia reached out for Liam as she began fading into the light, and for a moment their eyes locked, and Liam said, "I see you, honey, and I'll see you again very soon. I love you forever." We hope you liked today's story, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, or you too may wake up and be forced to realize your own reality.